Hi, I'm Tony Richards, and today I'm going to take you around my old neighborhood where I grew up. I moved in here. We moved in on Telegraph Hill, Lincoln's birthday, 1960. We moved out on St. Patrick's Day, 1966. So a little over 6 years I lived up here, from the ages of 7 to 13. And I'm just going to focus on the one little area where we lived, which is the second summit of Telegraph Hill. This is Coit Tower behind me. This is the highest peak of Telegraph Hill. The second peak of Telegraph Hill is at Union and Montgomery, and that's where we lived, and that's the area I'm going to focus on where I was a kid and had the run of the neighborhood. I did come up to Coit Tower quite often with my little dog and looked in the windows at the murals. We had a family friend, my friend from school across town, George. George's dad was superintendent of Golden Gate Park, and he told us, don't go to Coit Tower because there's gangs, you can get in trouble. But I used to come up here all the time with, like I say, with my little dog and walk around here, and not every day, but quite often. One day, George, my friend, comes over to visit me. So it's like, hey, let's go to Coit Tower. And it's his father that said, don't go around Coit Tower. Well, George and I come up here, and sure enough, a gang out of Chinatown starts chasing us with knives. So we ran, and I knew every little getaway, every little alleyway, how to get through apartment houses into the next street, things like that. So we escaped them, luckily. Could have been bad news. Anyway, I'm just going to focus on the area around Union Montgomery where I lived, but I'm up here now because I did come to Coit Tower by myself with my little dog quite often. This is the house I grew up in, and it was built in 1956. It's mid-century modern, very boxy. The windows went side to side. Nothing like it is now. It's extensively remodeled. But over across the street here, these little houses across the street, the little beige one is where the Banana King of San Francisco lived. He had a place down in the produce market at the foot of the hill, and he imported bananas. And his mother-in-law lived in the yellow house at the end, and then his sister-in-law lived in our house. And he had this giant Lincoln Premier, big Lincoln with fins in the mid-50s. Got it in that little tiny garage over there. Every Wednesday night, he'd maneuver that car out of that garage and take his wife out to dinner over in Marin County. Every Wednesday night, like clockwork. Anyway, this is the street I grew up on. Okay, we're going to go down here now. This is 1227 Montgomery Street. This was the featured in the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers. When I was a kid, the guy that lived here did a comic strip for the Chronicle called Romulus of Rome. Anyway, they since have added the top floor on. It used to be the single story over the garage. This building here on the corner of Green and Montgomery, during the 60s, the whole time we lived here, this building was vacant and gutted, even though it's prime property. And it still looks the same. They never fixed it up, but it looks like people are living there now. So I don't get it. Then that orange building over there, the orange apartment house over there, that's at the intersection of Green and Montgomery, was where the Michael Douglas character lived in the movie Basic Instinct. These steps, these are what's called the Montgomery stairs. This was a cliff here. These stairs were built in 1928. And the trees, you see, were planted in 1962 by attorney Melvin Belli. This is Melvin Belli's apartment building here. He had taken the entire top floor, 3 apartments, and combined them into one and added on that penthouse over there. And so they had the entire top floor for his penthouse. That building was built around 1930. And when I was a kid, there was a big pepper tree in the courtyard, and there's an acacia tree over here in the corner. I guess the tree died. But I knew just all the tenants in the building. I knew they're all my adult friends. And then in back of the building, there was an earthquake cottage where you rented it out to some lady. You wouldn't see it from the street. It was hidden behind. Okay. This is the ancillary peak of Telegraph Hill right here. Telegraph Hill is actually 2 peaks. The higher one is where Coit Tower is, and this is the shorter one. The 1906 fire was stopped right here. On this side of the street, the building survived the fire, and on down Montgomery to the north. The green building is a pair of flats that survives the 1906 fire, as well as the apartment building beyond it. Okay? I'm standing in front of what for years was the New Union Grocery. The building was built in 1915. The Speedy family took over the store in 1923, hence the name Speedy's New Union Grocery. It was my hangout when I was a kid. I used to come in here every day after school and buy a Coke. And then I would sweep the floors, stock the shelves sometimes for the owner. I'd ride shotgun with the delivery boy and went around the hill delivering groceries. And then later the butcher shop was over here, and the butcher hired me to clean up the butcher shop every Saturday night. My first little job was in here. And then with the money I made working for the butcher, I could buy my model cars and things like that. The butcher ended up marrying my mother's sister-in-law and became part of the family for the next 20 years. But when I first met him here, I thought he was a grouchy old guy. But turns out he's a sweetheart. Became part of the family. Now, this part of Union Street wasn't graded until 1939. It used to be dirt street, and it sloped up to these buildings, and that's why there's these giant retaining walls. And this tall one over here, the bottom floor was the first grocery store up here, the Cooney grocery store in the 1800s. And at any given time in the late 1800s, early 1900s, at any given time there was half a dozen mom and pop stores up here because the neighborhood was isolated. There was one way in and one way out. The purple house, the lower unit to the left, is where the Michael Douglas character lived on the TV show Streets of San Francisco, Inspector Keller. And these are all earthquake survivors from 1906. The fire didn't get them. Same thing with the other side of the street. Most of those houses on the other side of the street have been remodeled, so you can't really tell how old they are. Okay, the yellow house and the blue house are from the 1850s. And at that time, you could actually walk to Sansom Street. Sansom Street's way down at the bottom of the hill, but in those days it came up the hill slightly. They actually connected. I think there was another house behind the blue one that was on the edge of the cliff, and they tore it down. I'm standing at the edge of Calhoun Terrace, and below me is what remains of the Gray Brothers quarry. The Gray Brothers were responsible for digging out the east side of the hill in this area. And the building down at the bottom of the cliff is Philo T. Farnsworth's laboratory, where television was invented. Sheer drop off from here. This structure was a WPA project. The street was built by 1939, I think. This was a dirt pathway, and at one time it connected to Green Street until the quarry took it out. The house above me here, the White House, was built in 1854 by Dr. Robinson, I believe. Over here, this apartment building that steps down the hill in 4 sections is the Heffler apartment house, and it was built in I believe 1939, before the street was put in. They built this big apartment house on this cliff, and they had to, I guess, carry everything in. Anyway, I had friends that lived there when I was a kid, childhood friends. They lived in the top unit. And what a spectacular view they had from their place of the bay. Just beyond the Heffler apartment house is the Kahn house, which was designed by LA noted architect Richard Neutra. I think it's the only house he designed in San Francisco, but it was ultra modern, and it too was built before Calhoun Terrace. It was still the street was under construction when they built these 2 buildings. Across the street there was built in the 1800s. I don't know exactly when, but it's a brick building that's been stuccoed over. It's been there forever. During the 20s, it was a pool hall. I know that much. We're going to go to the intersection Alta. We'll just mention these and talk about this sign. This is School Street. 1863, it says. See? So, earthquake and fire survivors. Here and here. I want to talk about this modern building here on the corner briefly. It's built in the early 50s. Used to be a little grocery store here, you know, years back in the 1800s, early 1900s. There's a little grocery store here. But this building, one day this lady comes into the New Union Grocery and asks Pete Spediacci if there's any kids in the neighborhood that could do odd jobs for her. And he says, yeah, Tony will do it. So turns out they owned the Sort of Perfect Sleeper Mattress Company. And she was always kind to me. So yeah, I did odd jobs for her, helped take care of the building. This is the former Shadows restaurant. Now, it didn't always look this cute. Back around, I would guess, 61, they did an extensive remodel and gave it this European flavor. But there was a bricklayer putting these bricks in. The bricklayer was putting these bricks in, and I come along. I said, hey, mister, how come you're making those bricks crooked? And he said, well, we want it to look like, old European building and making it rustic. So he explained to me why he's doing brickwork. And he says to me, hey, kid, how come you're wearing an SF Giants cap? And I said, I don't know. And he says, well, they're bums. They can't even play ball. You should take it off. This is 31 Alta. It was built in 1853, about the same time as Dr. Robinson's house over in Calhoun. And they're both on the list of two of the oldest houses in San Francisco. The older house here that's not fixed up is number 25 Alta, and that was the Spediacci house. The Spediaccis are the ones that started New Union Grocery. There used to be an apartment house here, and I knew people that lived here, and I guess at some point it started sliding down the hill during bad rainstorms. But while we're up here, we have a good view of Napier Lane below us. The old house with white trim is where I used to deliver cat food to Grace Marchant. Grace Marchant is known for landscaping the Filbert stairs, and she had a bunch of cats she took care of. But you can see Napier Lane, goes, I don't know, maybe 100 feet. There's some cottages from the Gold Rush days, but you have to walk in, nowhere to park. This is the Malik apartment building. I'm not sure exactly when it was built. I'd say around 1940s. What's interesting is the murals on each side were made out of concrete. And the movie was Dark Passage. Humphrey Bogart was staying here in the movie, so that is noteworthy. This is the entrance of the Malik apartment building. In 60 years, still looks the same after 60 years. Just the way I remember it. It was always well taken care of. I remember that. Well, this is the start of the Filbert stairs and the gardens. Grace Marchant was responsible for. But most of the buildings down here are from the 1800s, mid to late 1800s. Right down here is Darrell Place. I want to show you Darrell Place. Here's an example over here of one of the 1800s cottages, a little white one. This is Darrell Place that goes back in there. Now, I had a friend that lived at the end of Gerald Place. They had a 3-story apartment house you had to walk to get to it. And they had a Cadillac. You know, they always have to hunt for a parking place. You know, and I'm thinking, it's funny. You got this nice car, nowhere to park it. And you got this nice house you got to walk into. Turns out the grandfather owned a string of movie theaters all around San Francisco. And they eventually moved to Pacific Heights. But this is the gardens down here. This wall dividing Montgomery Street was built in 1931. Before then, it was 2 dirt roads. You know, you could barely fit a car down. My father had a summer job as a mail carrier back in the day, and he was telling me about how the streets up here were dirt. It's like a little community unto itself. One way in, one way out, Union Street. But now we're on the Granite Street stairs, and there's numerous cottages from the 1800s here as well, just like the Filbert Street stairs. Then they modernized the stairs, both on Filbert and Greenwich here. They used to be rickety wood stairs, and now they're concrete and steel. The Granite Street stairs especially, I used to carve my initials in the posts. And then I had a little pocket knife I'd carry around when I was a kid. So I might have been 10 or 11. One day, I was down on the Embarcadero at the waterfront, and I encountered a group of toughies. By that I mean, there's those parrots. This is where the parrots originated, right in this area. Anyway, I was down on the waterfront and encountered a group of tough guys, teenagers, and they grabbed me by my ankles and dangled me off the pier, and all the stuff in my pockets fell into the water, and that's what happened to my little pocket knife that I used to carve my initials. Fell in the water. There's some parrots now. They're still here, but they're all over the city. This is Julius Castle. It was a restaurant for many years, closed a few years back. They've been trying to reopen it. I don't know what's going on with it. But I just wanted to point it out because there was a movie around 1951 called House on Telegraph Hill. And they put a false front on this place. And this was the movie house. You know. Anyway. Pretty interesting building. It's right on the edge of the cliff. I think it was built in the late 20s. There's another quarry below us here. It wasn't the Gray Brothers, it was some other quarry. So below us here is a steep cliff. And that big building below us is down on Sansom Street. Apartments, condos, I think. It's just a sheer drop. But if you take away the turret, it's like a Craftsman. All right, I hope you enjoyed my visit around my neighborhood and my childhood haunts. So thanks for watching.